you know, I mean, I like writing the prologue. The prologue to me, it was difficult to write because I love dogs. I mean, anyone knows me knows I love dogs. But that put a lot of skin in the game for me. Okay, I mean, the prologue was really about the book begins and ends in the Charles River. Okay, and to me, the Charles River is an analogy for, like, you know, it's a dirty river. It's a muddy, they call it the Muddy River, and it runs right through the city. Okay, and for generations of Bostonians, it's been there. Okay, it goes out to the harbor and it comes back in, and I feel like the Charles River to me is where a lot of Bostonians put all their fears and their hatred and their anger and their love and a lot of emotions that they feel are in that river. Generations of Bostonians to me, and it goes out and it comes back in and it just circles around. And so I knew I wanted to start in the Charles River, and I knew I wanted to start with something that kids could be involved in, and yet would not be too big, but would also, you know, show that there's a lot of skin in the game. And I wanted to show that Bobby especially was a guy, would grow up to be a guy who understood the bottom line in things and was willing to make hard decisions. Okay, he saw a situation. Now, was it the best decision? It was the best decision he could make at that time. And he thought he was making the best decision. And very few kids at that age would make that decision. Even if they thought it was the thing that they wanted to do, they wouldn't have the nerve to do it. Okay, and he did have the nerve to do it. For better or worse, he's willing to raise the stakes.
I'm so glad you read it, and that's why I wanted you to read the prologue, because I think it says so much about the characters.
I don't want to give away too much of the book.
And
but,
no, and of course I wouldn't ask you, read the last page.
Right.
But I just think it establishes so much about the characters and about the writing, because I've clearly loved all of your books and I know them all well, but this is my favorite. And it's definitely my favorite. I think it's got the most powerful writing in it. The prologue is one of the places I love. A lot of the things that happened in the past, I love the whole taxi driving scene. That's so wonderful.
I forgot about
And that was a fun one, I bet, to write, because it just feels, it feels so...
Go ahead. My grandmother owned a cab company, so, you know, there's a lot of autobiographical things in here that are just very superficial kind of stakes. Like I set the book right where I grew up, the street I grew up on. Because I'm like, what the hell, I'm going to set it in Brighton, I might as well set it there. What difference does it make? And I know the geography, I know kind of like everything around there, so it just makes it easier for me. And then my grandmother owned a cab company and ran a cab company with her 5 brothers who were all just crazy guys. And so I put that in the book. You know, so those are probably the 2 things that are most autobiographical. Now, the guys in the book that drive the cabs in this book are not my guys, my uncles, my great uncles. But they, you know, my great uncles might actually run crazier than these guys. But anyway, so, you know, that was fun. That was fun to put in there. And you know, my mom hasn't read it yet. So my mom and my dad haven't read it yet. So it was my mom's mom that ran the cab company. So I don't know. I think she'll like it. We'll see.
You gotta love all the...
Well, yeah, that's all real stuff. You know, I mean, some of it's real stuff.
And I'm not going to give away what this is, but is the mouse hole real?
Yes. Yeah, that's real.
Wow,
that's real.
Great. I'm not telling you what it is.
I forgot about that, too. God, I got to read the book. Okay. Once you start writing another book, you know, like I'm halfway, at least more than halfway through the next book. You just completely forget about the one you wrote. It just completely goes out of your mind, and you just have to get pulled back into it. So, like, this is the first event I've done for this book, and so hopefully I'll get a little more familiar with it.
Final question, and before I open it up, and you touched on this, but one of the things I've noticed, and particularly reading this over again, is the prominence of animals, and you know, they're kind of quiet in the background, but this time reading it over, I was really thinking about it. And this book begins with the dog, and almost all your books, dogs are important in some part. And I was looking on this page, and this is very early in the book, where we actually are seeing things from the cat's point of view. Yeah. The cat flared his nostrils and squinted against the sun, dipped in 50 shades of cold heat and rising fast. Its nascent rays caught in a stray pane of white glass. He, being the cat, thought about the boy. Then he thought about the old lady. And so I'm thinking, okay,
But
that's
the cat is actually the cat is an analogy for a person. The cat is actually for
right,
a
right.
Yeah,
Because you don't dedicate the book to the
Right.
cat at the beginning.
Well,
so
I do a lot more of that in the book I'm writing now. I mean, there's a lot more of that stuff. I think some of it comes from I studied a lot of Ovid in school, Ovid's Metamorphoses, and so I was really interested. I've always been interested in animals, okay, and how humans can be portrayed as animals and humans' relationships with animals.
how he's personified is.
Sometimes how he's personified, or how in our minds we have certain images of ourselves or of other people as animals, and then how you can drift in and out. It's kind of been a thing that I've always been fascinated with. And then also how animals can often reflect our feelings and our emotions and how people relate to them. So, it's not something that I don't really think about any of
Right.
these things. They just sort of come out, And like the whole Charles River thing, I didn't really think about that when I was writing. I was just like, oh, let's set it by the river, because that was kind of cool. And I used to hang out down by the river a lot. And so, but then later on, as you get into the book, you're like, okay, but you know what? The Charles River can mean something more than that. It can mean, and it does mean more than that. Sometimes you don't realize it when you're writing it, but later on, you're like, okay, there was more here than I thought. And sometimes readers will point stuff out. And you're like, yeah, that's probably true. I didn't think of it, but that's certainly a good way to interpret it. So.
Yeah. All right. So, do people have questions? Anyone have any questions?
Somebody.
I'll start.
Yeah, sure.
Huge fan.
Yeah.
Amazon delivered today, by the way.
Oh,
So
great.
you're good.
It's on a drone, in a drone, or that's next, right? Yeah.
Is there any Michael Kelly in Bobby or Kevin?
I like to think it's Michael Kelly in all of us, but no, I don't think so. I think that's a good question. I mean, not intentionally, not knowingly. I think I would say more. That's a good question. There might be a little bit in both of them. I was going to say more in Bobby, but there's a certain toughness in Bobby. Okay, so one of the main things in the book is like this idea that two conflicting ideas, which are a lot in classical literature, which is do you really have free will? Okay, or once you set things in motion, once you set a series of events in motion, if you have a fatalistic view that no matter what happens, no matter what you do, you're going to have to face a certain consequence for that action. It could be a year from now, it could be 10 years from now, it could be 20 years from now, but eventually that's going to happen and there's no getting around it. And that's, to me, much more of a Michael Kelly view of the world, and that's a Bobby view of the world. So these guys are involved, as kids, they're involved in this crime. Okay, at the age of like 13, 14, and Bobby's quite a bit older, he's like 17. And not giving away too much of the book, but they're involved in this crime, and the younger kid, Kevin, is sent out of town. He's put in the back of one of the cabs and just gone. Okay, and the older guy, who perceives himself to not have any future in the world and has this very fatalistic view of the world, he says, I'm going to stay, I'll take the weight, I'm going to face the music, and he does, all right, but there is no music, because no one, the case is just never investigated, no one's ever charged, but everybody in the neighborhood thinks Bobby was responsible for this crime, and it's a big crime, and so it just sits there. It just sits there for 25 years. And Kevin never sees his family again. Kevin's gone in New York, and he's brought up, and he never comes back, never sees his family. And the next time he comes back into Boston, he's now grown up as a 40-year-old journalist. He wins a Pulitzer Prize for investigative journalism, and he comes back into Brighton for the first time, investigating a fresh series of killings. But he also wants to come back to try and fix this, okay? And in his mind, he's, to me, a lot like Oedipus and Sophocles. He thinks with his rationale and his intellect and everything that he does, and he's a powerful guy now, he's a capable guy, he's going to come back into Brighton, and he's going to fix this. He's going to solve the killings that are going on now, and he's going to fix this old thing that happened. I can figure it out. I can figure it out so that we don't have to pay a price to fix it. And Bobby doesn't feel that way at all. Bobby's a neighborhood kid. He's been there the whole time. He's not a local bookie. He runs a local book, and everybody's pretty much like, stay away from Bobby. And Bobby sees Kevin one morning for the first time get out of his car, and he's walking across the street towards Bobby's apartment. And Bobby's up on like the third floor, looking down into the street, and he sees him, and he thinks he sees him and he recognizes him for who he is, even though he's grown up. He can tell by the way he walks and the way he slouches. He's like, I know who that is. That's Kevin, and because they were like brothers growing up, and he thinks, you know, that this has been like a letter that was posted 25 years ago, and has been circling in the mail ever since. And one day, Bobby knew, he's thinking to himself, I knew it was going to land in my mailbox, and I knew I was going to have to open it. And when I opened it, that will define who I am. That will reveal who I am, and it will define who I am. And there was no getting around it. I knew this letter was always going to be there, and here it comes, in the person of Bobby. And that's a very much, to me, I'm very much a Michael Kelly view of the world. It's going to happen. I'm not going to try to avoid it. I'm going to have the courage to stand up to it, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get to the other side of it, even if that, whatever that means. And whatever that means is a lot of what the rest of the book's about. And Kevin doesn't feel that way at all. Kevin feels like a lot of people would feel, frankly, which is, we can manage this, we can handle this, you know. We have ability, we have resources, let's work with it, you know. And so they have this immediate clash of the way of looking at the world, and I think that kind of plays out throughout the book. So that would be a much more of a Michael Kelly view.
And to give you an even shorter answer to that, I can say if you really like the Michael Kelly character, you're going to love both of these characters. Yeah. There's enough things that they have in common, and as Michael just explained, they're different, but there's enough things in common with that way of looking at the world and that way of taking action that you're going to love these characters.
I've never thought about Michael Kelly's childhood, to be honest. You know, he just kind of exists for me in that time, in that place. I thought about a lot about other parts of his life during that time that he's alive, because he's, you know, to me he's in his late 30s. But I've never really thought about him in terms of his childhood. You know, I mean, if I write a book where I get into that, then maybe I will. Anything else?
We were talking before, I wondered, did you write the prologue first, or did you come back?
I did. Yeah, I did write the prologue first. Sometimes I don't. Like this book, I know I'm going to have a prologue, but the book I'm working on now, and I know what it's going to be, but I haven't written it yet. But this one, I did write that first, and I rewrote it a lot, but I had the basics of it down right away, and then I guess I did. But then it goes to like 1975, and to them playing baseball in Dorchester and playing in a league game in Dorchester, and I wrote that, and then I started skipping around. So you know, you don't write the book. I don't write the books beginning to end. I kind of skip around, but I did write the prologue and then that first bit, and just to get Bobby and Kevin set up as teenagers in '75, and then I just started skipping around. You just kind of, everybody's different. Some writers, you know, they outline everything. I don't do that, and so I just kind of go wherever it takes me. If I know I'm going to write a chapter, if I know I have a chapter in my head that I don't know where it's going, but I know it's going to happen, I'll just write it. And put it aside and wait for it until it comes in, and then I'll just stream it in. So I mean, at some point you get enough in there, like 200 or 300 pages in, 200 pages in, where you start to like work just sequentially, and you stop just picking things, and then you do start trying to figure out, okay, how is this all going to come together? Because in most novels, crime novels anyways, around 200 pages in, 250 pages in, things need to start coalescing. To me, a lot of them, especially like the Kelly novels, but even this, it's like you just kind of throw out a bunch of threads, and they go for a while, and they go, and then you start to bring them back, and then you start to wrap them up, and then they start to, you know, kind of come together. And you want to make that seem sort of inevitable, although not obvious, at the end. So at some point you do have to start making that shift, making that turn.
Do you know how it's going to end when you start?
No. Sometimes I do. This one I did not. This one I had like 4 different endings. 4 very different endings. I wish I could tell you. But there were 4 very different endings. You know, the whole book is pretty dark. But the one ending, which is the darkest ending,
well, you can't say it. I know.
Well, I'm not going to say it, but it was. I don't know. I guess it wasn't my favorite. I mean, I like this ending. I like this ending, but I really like that ending a lot too. But I think that this ending is better. You know, so in a sense, I guess I had more good endings for this one than most books. I had like 3 or 4 really great endings that I thought would all work. And so I did struggle with that a little bit. I kind of solicited a lot of opinions from people. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? And they get sick of me. They're like, Michael, just pick one. And so, but often, no, I don't know how it's going to end. But the ending's obvious to me when I get there. When I get there, it's obvious how it has to end usually. The Kelly books, anyways. When I get there, I know how it's going to end. But like in the Chicago way, there was a huge, I don't think it's up in case somebody hasn't, but there's a huge part in that I didn't figure out until way late in the book, which is a huge part of the book. And then I went back and I thought, oh God, that's so obvious. Why didn't I know that the whole time? And I did kind of know it the whole time. I just didn't consciously know it. But I think unconsciously I knew it. And then once I went back, I was like, yeah, all of these hints are throughout the book that this is the way it has to be. So, it's like, I don't know who it was. It was some sculptor said that, the statue's in the marble. Okay? Yeah, I don't know, Michelangelo? Yeah. So he said, the statue's in the marble. Okay, easy, right? You look at this big piece of marble, and that's how you feel. You feel like the book is in there. The book is in this big block of stuff in your head, and you just have to spend enough time with it and chip away enough and just be willing to do that, which is, can be cumbersome and tiresome and painful at times. But if you spend enough time there, it's already there. It's already created in your head. You just don't know it yet. And so I think if you spend enough time with it, and believe me, that sustains me on many days when I'm like, here. But I do believe that. I do believe that. I don't think I would have believed that before I started writing. I didn't believe that. I didn't believe that, but I do now. Because some things just come so ready, just drop from heaven. A lot of times what happens is you will write for a long time and nothing will be happening. Maybe it'll happen for a couple hours, and then you're like, oh, this is all garbage. But then you'll go out and you'll go for a run, or you'll go, walk your dog, or do something else, and then boom, it just drops from the heavens. Like whole pages of dialogue, whole things in your head that you can just kind of like put right down. It's all there. Plot points, all kinds of stuff. And I think your subconscious works on stuff, or like when you go into sleep. A lot of stuff when you go into sleep, as you start to relax, all of a sudden you get these really great things. And you better write it down because you'll forget it. The only thing you remember is that it was really good. So, that really sucks. That happens. It still happens. Because you're really tired and you're like, oh, this is so vivid in my mind. There's no way I'm going to forget this. How am I going to forget it? And next day, no clue. You're like, God, it's like a color in your head. It's like, I think it was red, but I have no idea anything beyond that. I know it's like red. So that's the creative process. It's kind of crazy.
So it's been about an hour.
Okay.
So, one more question from anybody?
Yes. I want to ask you about the revision process. Do you spend more time working on the story, tagging it up, reading somebody?
During the revisions?
Yeah, or do you spend more time on the storytelling, fixing the words, making sentences better?
Both. I mean, there's a saying that writing is rewriting, and that's really where, like, most of the writing, in terms of like the nice words and whatever you want to call it, is done in the rewriting. The first draft, if you read that, you're like, what is it? It's really just so there's all of the writing, all of the polishing and stuff, all of the nice words and the images and the tightening is in the rewriting. Rewriting. You rewrite so many times you can't even count how. I mean, there's no way I could count how many times I rewrite. I rewrite as I write. I'm constantly rewriting even as I write. And in the storylines. The storylines change dramatically during the rewrite. Sometimes, you'll be like, no, throw this out. I don't need that. And then I can just put these together, or I'll add this. I'll take this whole chunk and put it over here. And so you have to be open to that. I have to be open to that. I can't get locked into like. I think a mistake writers make is they get locked into something and they're like, okay, this works, so I'm just going to try and then at some point it stops working, and like you're trying to save something that's not worth saving, so you got to kill it, you got to get rid of it, and you got to go on, and that's painful, but it's the best thing to do, and it happens a lot in revising and rewriting. So rewriting is a lot of creating goes on in the rewriting, but to me the heart and soul and the heartbeat of the characters is in that first moment when they first draw a breath, when they first are created, and that first scene is created. that's really where the essence of the thing is really, you know, done. And so, you know, so there's different parts to it. Okay? Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.